Penguin Random House Audio presents The Rise of the Dragon, an illustrated history of the Targaryen Dynasty, Volume 1, by George R. Martin, Elio M. García Jr., and Linda Antonsen, read for you by Harry Lloyd. Preface. The history of Westeros stretches back thousands of years, but the period in which House Targaryen unified the various realms into the Seven Kingdoms, as we know them, covers less than 300. The history of the family goes back further than that, however, to its beginnings in the freehold of Valyria. The Targaryens were an ancient and noble lineage, dragonlords who bred and rode the great beasts that had extended the freehold's power across western Essos. Yet they were still a relatively minor family among the great Valyrian houses. When Aegon Targaryen sold his lands and properties and moved his entire family and their dragons to Valyria's westernmost outpost, the isle called Dragonstone in the Narrow Sea, his rivals thought him a coward. Little did they know that his daughter, Daenys the Dreamer, had foretold the doom of Valyria. 12 years later, the freehold was destroyed in a cataclysm when the volcanic 14 flames erupted, shattering the Valyrian peninsula and the empire along with it. In the chaos that followed, all the dragonlords of Valyria perished, along with their dragons, apart from the Targaryens, on their rocky isle of Dragonstone. What follows in this book is a guide to the first half of that period, beginning with Aegon's conquest, through the end of the regency of Aegon III, Dragonbane. The Conquest. The Seven Kingdoms. Beginning in the year 2 BC, before the conquest, Aegon Targaryen and his sisters launched their invasion of Westeros with the intention of unifying the entire continent under their rule. Opposing them were 7 individual kingdoms, each with a unique history stretching back thousands of years. Before discussing the events of the conquest, it seems prudent to take a moment to examine each of these varying realms and their rulers as they existed at the time. The Stormlands. The Stormlands are centered around the Rainwood, the heavily forested southeastern region of Westeros, and are bordered to the north by the Blackwater River, to the south by the Dornish Marches, and to the west by the Reach. Legends claim that the first Storm King was Durin Godsgrief, who gained the enmity of the gods of wind and sea when he won the love of their daughter, Eleni. Durin raised a succession of castles for himself and his Eleni that the gods then repeatedly destroyed, until a young boy helped Durin raise a 7th castle. Due to its massive curtain walls and drum tower, this castle could withstand the god's fury, and was ever after known as Storm's End. The boy would become Bran the Builder, and House Durrandon ruled for thousands of years from its seat at Storm's End. The Storm King Arlen III expanded the realm by conquering the Riverlands some 400 years before the conquest, stretching the domain of House Durrandon from the Narrow Sea to the Sunset Sea. Yet 3 centuries later, the Storm King Arryk lost the Riverlands to Harwin Hoare, a king of the Iron Islands. Arryk's 2 subsequent attempts to regain the Riverlands failed, and a 3rd attempt, under Arryk's son, Arlen V, ended in Arlen's death. Arlen V's successor was his young son Argilac, later known as Argilac the Arrogant, who would be the last of the Storm Kings. As a boy, Argilac turned back an attempted Dornish invasion, and his reputation only grew from there. He joined an alliance with several of the free cities against Volantis, and killed King Garth VII Gardener at the Battle of Summerfield. His only heir at the time of the conquest was his daughter, Argella. The Kingdom of the Isles and the Rivers. Although the histories of Westeros seem certain that the Iron Islands were settled by the first men, The priests of the drowned god on the Iron Islands claim that the Ironborn are a people apart, created in the image of their god. Whatever the truth, the Iron Islands have a long history of maritime activity, fishing the rich waters, trading tin and iron ore, and sending reavers and pirates to pillage and make war on the Greenlands. The archipelago contains 31 islands, of which there are 7 major inhabited ones. Legends claim that the Grey King ruled the Isles in the Age of Heroes, but any details of his reign are lost to the mists of time. What is more certain is that each isle had a Salt King and a Rock King, each elected to these offices, until the priest Gallon Whitestaff convinced the Ironborn to unify by electing a High King at the first ever Kingsmoot. The centuries-long era of these High Kings, called the Driftwood Kings for their wooden crowns, brought the Iron Islands to the apex of their power. During the reign of Cored the Cruel, the Ironborn held much of the western shore of Westeros under their dominion. These gains were slowly lost, however, especially after Euron Greyiron and his supporters slaughtered his rivals at the last Kingsmoot, establishing the first hereditary High Kingship. The turmoil that followed on the Iron Islands made it easier for the mainland kingdoms to drive out the Ironborn, until the great kingdom of the Isles and the rivers was reduced once more to just the Iron Islands. It would take centuries, and House Hoare succeeding the Grey Irons as kings, for the Ironborn to begin to reclaim their lost ground in the Riverlands. Most notably, King Harwin Hoare, known as Hardhand, launched an invasion of the Riverlands, driving out the Storm Kings, who then controlled the Trident. Harwin's grandson, Harren the Black, would rule the united kingdom of the Isles and the Rivers until the conquest, beggaring the Riverlords by erecting an enormous castle by the God's Eye. This castle, Harrenhal, took 40 years to complete, and the histories say that the massive fortress was finished on the very day that Aegon Targaryen and his sisters set foot on Westeros at the start of the conquest. The Reach. The most fertile and populous region in the Seven Kingdoms, the Reach, is also one of the largest, though dwarfed by the size of the north. It dominates the southwestern portion of the continent, bordered by the foothills of the Westerlands to its north, the Red Mountains of Dawn to the south, and the marches of the Stormlands to the east. The Kingdom of the Reach claims an ancient connection to the first High King of all the First Men, Garth Greenhand. Powerful and potent, Garth allegedly fathered scores of children from whom many houses of the Reach claimed descent. The most notable of these was House Gardener, who established their seat at Highgarden beside the mighty river known as the Mander. Over the centuries, the Gardeners would expand their domain beyond the central plains of the Reach, stretching from the shores of the Sunset Sea in the west to the Stormlands in the east, and from the foothills of the Westerlands and the Black Water in the north to the Red Mountains of Dawn in the south. The Gardener kings ruled their green realm for millennia, weathering the arrival of the Andals by adopting their ways and making the Reach the birthplace of chivalry and knighthood in Westeros. Mern the Ninth was the latest in a long line of kings, and one queen, to rule the Reach when the Targaryens first appeared in Westeros. The future of House Gardener seemed secure against this latest invasion, however, as Mern commanded the greatest army in Westeros, as well as having sons and grandsons to spare to secure his succession, and many other male kinsmen besides. The Westerlands. A land of rugged hills in the west of the continent, the Westerlands at the time of the conquest stretched from the shores of the Sunset Sea in the west to the foothills from which the rivers Tumblestone and Red Fork issue in the east, and were bounded to the north by Iron Man's Bay, while the lands of the Reach bordered them to the south. In ancient times, the first men discovered plentiful gold and silver in the rugged hills and rolling plains of the Westerlands. The Casterlys were among the most powerful lords of the West, secure at Casterly Rock, the huge stone hill riddled with seemingly endless gold mines beneath it. But legends hold that
Sample complete. Ready to continue?